welcome to my studio.
This video, the whole video, is tip time. There's a famous saying, happy brush, happy wife. And I'll tell you why. So, kidding aside, today's video is all about how to take care of your brushes. But basically, how I take care of my brushes. Today, I'll share with you 5 tips on how I take care of my brushes. And all these tips actually boils down to the very last tip. But first, a quick shout out to my channel partners. This channel is supported by all these awesome brands. And of course, this channel won't be possible without the support of my patrons. Now, let me share my top 5 brush care tips. There are 2 basic types of brushes. One, the synthetic brushes with the black handle, and of course, the natural sable brushes. These brush care tips apply to both the synthetic brushes and the Kolinsky or natural hair sable brushes. My very first tip is to clean, and clean. For quick cleaning, I just use a mild soap and rub the brush there until I have really nice soap on the brush. And then I shape it a bit and then rinse it really well. I only do this like a really quick clean if you're still painting. So here I know that I'm finished with the dry brushing. So I do a quick clean of my dry brush. I use mild soap and then like rinse it really well, actually under running water. Then I dry the brushes, and then of course if you have a brush holder that like keeps the brushes upside down, much better. Now, after painting like this one, I painted like not a huge but a batch of miniatures, and I'm done with the actual painting of the miniatures. I clean all my brushes thoroughly. So there's quick clean, especially if you want to clean it afterwards. You want to clean it thoroughly once you're finished with the actual painting, and then this thorough cleaning. I highly recommend that you clean your brushes with this thorough cleaning once you finish painting. I'm using this incredible brush cleaner, funny name, by Chroma. This is made in Australia, and then it's good with oils, acrylics, and even lacquers. Now, this is super good stuff. You need to prepare a tepid water or a warm water, and then you mix the soap with water. I mix the soap 1:1 or roughly 2 parts paint sometimes, or not paint, 2 parts soap sometimes, and then 1 part water. You just need the water because it's warm, and warm water cleans the brushes better. Gently rub the brush, the bristles on the side of the container, and then you have a really nice brush. You have a really nice clean brush afterwards. If you are cleaning a really dirty brush though, or a really old brush, you may have to do this 2 times or 3 times until the brush is super clean. Now, if you're cleaning a really old brush with a bit of dried paint on it, you might want to scrub it with your fingernails. And then after this one, you need to really rinse it very well under running water. I just had to show you a black tray, because it looks nicer on video. Now, you have to try to really dry your brushes and clean it with a piece of towel, and then this is important before the next step. It's important to know that after this next step, the shaping of the brush, you can't really lick the brush anymore. This brush shaper dries to a wax-like finish. So if you plan to use the brush again, you have to rinse it under water or rinse it with water so that you remove this wax. There is also another kind of a brush shaper, which is an actual wax, and I got a comment before that you could actually use wax for your hair for shaping your brushes. Now you have to let this wax dry, and it's always better, it's super recommended if you have a brush holder that will keep the brushes upside down. By keeping your brushes upside down, the water, if ever there is still water, will drip down towards the bristles and won't slowly rot the handles. My second tip is use a fat brush with a fine tip. But basically, this doesn't always apply. Just make sure to use a brush that is bigger than what you need. Using a big brush for like the intended use of that brush takes a little bit of practice, at least for me. However, by using a big brush, this actually protects or like prolong the life of your brushes. So if you're doing layering, glazing, or washes, or even detail painting, use a slightly bigger brush than the intended use. But here you could see me using a detail brush. To be honest, I'm more comfortable using a detail brush when painting details because of my background, which is watercolor painting. But do take note that the amount of paint on the brush is very minimal. Now my third tip is to use synthetic brushes for washes. Basically, if you want to do washes with Citadel shades and like inks, much more with speed paints, it's highly advisable or recommended that you simply use synthetic brushes. You don't want to use your really expensive and precious sable brushes for washes. Now for my fourth tip, I highly recommend you also use synthetic brushes for like techniques like stippling. Stippling can be harsh on your brush because you kind of like stipple like paint in dots, but basically you could also use your Kolinsky or your sable brushes. However, make sure that if you stipple with your sable brushes, stipple sideways, like use the side of the brush. Do not use the point of the brush when stippling. Now my last most important tip is related to tip number 2 and tip number 3. Never or try not to allow the paints to reach the metal part or the ferrule. This is why it is very recommended that you use a bigger brush for the job that you need to do. Although you could see here I'm using a detail brush, but you could see the amount of paint is like super small. And here I'm glazing the sword. I'm using a bigger brush because glazes and washes and speed paints kind of run towards the ferrule. And that will be the slow death of your brushes. Regular paints are the worst though because they're thicker and they easily build up in the metal part of the brush. However, they don't run really fast towards the ferrule, but make sure that you don't allow regular paints in the metal part of your brushes. Needless to say, the number one killer for brushes is paint or paint buildup in the ferrule. Now let's sum it up. Basically, number 1, you clean, and clean. You could do a thorough clean or a quick clean while you're still painting. And of course, you have to rinse really well, remove the soap in your brushes. Also, use a bigger brush than in the intended use, like use a really big brush if you're doing washes and glazes, and use a smaller brush, but make sure that the amount of paint is really small in the brush. Now, the number 3, do not use your precious Kolinsky or sable brushes for washes because they slowly kill your brushes. Number 4, stippling and feathering and all those techniques, it's better if you use your synthetic brushes. And number 5, of course, which kind of relates everything together, is never allow paint to build up in the ferrule. That's it, Pansit. I hope you liked the video and watch these other videos.